All right, welcome everyone. Hi, how we doing? Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, meh. It's good to see your thumbs. It's good to see your smiles. Thanks for being here. So we're at week 11 in a 16-week semester. And today we're gonna start class by taking a look at your third and final community lab assignment. So let me share my screen and we'll look at it step by step. So now that you've selected your seed and you have a strategy or a couple of promising strategies in place through your scenario planning and impact analysis in the last lab, you will be focusing in on creating an action plan for scaling up. This lab will be due on May 30th, about the second to last week of our 16-week semester. So you'll see our description here. You can find this assignment under this week on Moodle if you haven't taken a look at it already. And as you'll see from the description, you're really bringing all the pieces together. One of the first steps is that you're going to be now very carefully engaging the partners involved, especially if you haven't really gone that far yet, to get their feedback in order to build out a action plan together. So this action plan is supposed to see and find alignment between the activities you hope to do and the timeline and the roles and responsibilities and resources you'll need. So the final artifact will be a presentation or proposal of your choice to a relevant audience in your community. So let's take a look at the overview. Please note that this is the largest assignment in terms of point values for your final grade. So our first community lab assignment was for 10 points. The second one that you've just completed was for 15, and this is for 20 points total. So as I mentioned, the first step here is to re-engage or engage your partners and solicit feedback on your scenario planning and proposed strategy from lab number 2. I noted that for a few of you in your last assignments, you didn't quite identify which strategy you felt was strongest after doing the impact analysis. So I pointed that out in my feedback if that was the case. So you might need to do a little bit more thinking there. And in some cases it might be that you actually are advocating that your leadership team and your community does a combination of 2. We just want to be explicit about that for this assignment. Sorry, I'm seeing a chat coming through. Okay, take a look at that in a second. So next, you're going to revise your strategy and develop a robust action plan from that. You will thirdly analyze impact and still try to do a little bit more of sort of the scenario planning that we did from last lab, where you're considering alternative solutions to address potential gaps. So what are those assumptions that you're making that might not really pan out? Do you have enough resources that and do the partners involved have enough capacity to pull this off? And then finally, you'll present a more or less polished action plan for a relevant audience. So again, we hope that this lab, hopefully more than any of the other labs, will be the most directly helpful and useful in your community. So we want you to approach this final presentation as one that you could be sharing. You could maybe be kind of passing it out in a flyer form or giving a presentation to your leadership committee or to your boss or to or submitting to a potential funder. So you want to have all the pieces there for a particular audience to really understand the picture of what's going on here. And that's what we'll be looking for, that comprehensiveness. So yeah, we don't necessarily need to go through the details for each step, but you'll see we've got suggested activities for each of them, and then the advice on how to show this for your artifact, with partnership engagement, with creating your strategy. I want to draw your attention to analyzing, step 3. So again, we're looking for you'll notice a lot of these questions are similar to what the types of analysis that we've been asking you to do in the other labs. So we're just, again, wanting you to be very thoughtful in this, not going at it as, since the beginning you've had this one idea of exactly what you want to do and how you're going to do it, but making sure that you're being intentional with your partners about building this out. And then your last step is the shortest step, because that we really hope you take it and own it, and put it in a format that makes sense for you and your community. So we will have readings and assignments, other assignments over the next couple of weeks while you're working on this. So please make sure that you are making progress little by little towards the lab assignments. And like usual, we'll have at least 1 week where we really spend a lot of time going through troubleshooting what you're working on and how to bring it all together.
So
Go ahead, Luke.
Just to build on a couple things or emphasize a couple things you touched on throughout that. One reason this assignment is worth more points is because we are really, as you can see, these assignments are a continuation. So this should be substantially, you should have the most to work with because you've been working on these ideas, you've been evolving them, you've been thinking about these. So some of these assignments, we're asking you to go back, things like the scenario planning, and go further. And Rosie said one really important thing about when it comes to that analysis. In the previous assignment, the one you just did for 15 points, that was a very kind of subjective assignment, right? You were doing it based on how everything looked from your standpoint. You were planning it, you were strategizing, you were laying out the components based on the information. This assignment is now asking you to take that strategy and start to engage with it. So that's that. From the activity standpoint, it should be a natural progression of the assignment you just finished. And we're asking you what happens now when you take that analysis process, for instance, and engage your partners in it, so that it's not just your analysis, but it's a collective analysis. And what happens when you start to put forward the first scenario, when it says, what were the alternative scenarios? As soon as you put that forward to your partners, they're going to say, well, have you considered doing this? Hopefully, if you have good engaged partners, at which point you have an alternative scenario and you collectively as a group need to then weigh between those. So a lot of this assignment, this is the point, we're going for depth. This is the quality piece of this. And so just remember that as you're doing this assignment, you shouldn't really be dealing with things that are new ideas, unless they come as a result of engaging your partners. But keep the emphasis and activity in your mind on how you're going to engage your partners. Do that engagement and then tell us how it goes, because you can have a strategy and you put that strategy forward. And based on that, you're going to get reactions. You're going to get results. And I promise you, the collective product, the group product that you come out with, if you do this in a real participatory fashion, is going to be better than anything you could have come up with by yourself. And it's also going to look different than you're expecting it to look right now. And that is the magic and fun of social change, is that when the collective result is always better than the original plan. And it's different. But in order to do that, you need to roll with the punches. You need to go with the flow, listen to people, and what you have in hand from assignment 2 is a strategy. It's a vague roadmap. It's made to be changed. Okay, it's not a detailed plan yet. You're taking it and turning it into a plan as a result of collecting more evidence, of the result of engaging your partners. Remember that scaling up is all about building functional relationships, and the plan is just a plan for how those relationships are going to interact with one another. So this is a fun assignment. It's a hard assignment, but it's a fun assignment. It should be a very useful assignment. And we look forward to spending most of the rest of the course helping support you in that. So back over to you, Rosie. I just wanted to emphasize a couple of those key points.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. So that's really all that I wanted to discuss. So are there any questions about this assignment?
Well, if not, we know that it's, maybe some of you haven't had a chance to really review it. So what we would say is make a point. We'll reemphasize at the end of class. Spend time with this assignment now so that you can come with technical questions about it to class next week. And then, get working on it. Good luck and let us know if we can help. But I guess it's over to you, Daniel. Take it away. This is going to be a fun class.
It's like Luke says, this is a fun assignment for you with this Lab 3. It's really a fun presentation I get to make with you today. Okay, I just want to forewarn you, I really enjoy telling this story that I'm about to share with you. But with this assignment that you're now starting, Luke was calling a plan. And it is a plan, but I want you to know that it is a dynamic plan. It is a plan that is a process. Your Lab 3, if you think this is a piece of paper, like an architect's plan for building a house, you're not probably going to be able to do it. You can create the plan, but it probably is beyond your abilities to do it. And so you will have created a piece of paper that might give you a good grade in this class, but you won't actually create scale. And what I want to share with you right now is going to scale at a level that I never expected. I thought I had a big idea when we said we're going to create a national park in another country, in this case, China. And China was closed to Americans to come into. So we'll create a national park in a place we can't even go to. I thought that was a big idea. What you're going to find out is that the idea ended up even bigger. And the idea ended up bigger because we created a process, not a plan that was static, a dynamic process that got partners. And the partners implemented the planning into creating results. And I'm just one guy. I had no money. I had an idea. We call it seed. And it went to scale. And I want to show you now the story of that idea going to scale with one guy who didn't even belong in that country. I wasn't a citizen and I had no money. It's all about the process. So let's take a look at it. And come on, let's get the, can somebody give me, if it's thumbs up, it's working.
You have an idea.
Yep. Okay, you too have ideas. And that's what your lab number one was. Okay? Your lab number one was an idea. You were a person with a seed of an idea, lab one, and let's say you have no power and no money. How do you take your seed and grow it to scale? That's what I'm going to talk about right now. You first get the seed planted. What does scale one mean? Can somebody tell me what scale one means? Come on, speak up.
You just mean the key function, right? Not the whole
Yeah,
acronym.
yeah. What is it? What does the SCA part of me mean? SCALE in scale one. Rosie, do you want to help him out, or Luke?
Sure. Stimulating community awareness, learning,
That's right.
and what?
Extension
And extension.
or energy.
Energy. I was gonna say that's not
Energy,
true.
yeah.
Energy.
Yeah,
Extension.
energy comes in another one. It's energy. Okay, so this is what you did in lab one. You
And
stimulate.
even last semester.
Yeah. So then we go to see the next stage, scale squared, where you're going to improve that seed. And how do you improve that seed, somebody? Please tell me, scale squared. Come on, folks.
Please, you unmute. He knows.
This
Scale squared
still
means self-help
it,
center
it means
for
self-evaluation.
and experimentation.
Ooh, okay, we got two answers. So I think it was Herman saying it means self-evolution, which is a good summary. And then Melchiad said the acronym. Can you say it again, Melchiad?
Scale squared means self-help center for action learning and experimentation.
Both answers are correct. Okay. And what's important here is that the idea is the seed is growing. Okay. And so that's what you're going to see now. And then the seed grows to scale cubed. And I'm going to show you that as well. Okay. So a person from another country with no money took an idea in scale one, scale squared, scale cubed. And the idea was extraordinary. The highest mountain, Mount Everest, for the highest purpose that people have in the future, which is sustainable living on Earth. It's an extreme idea. Okay? And this is looking down on Mount Everest when we were, as this project started to grow. Okay, so how do we grow this seed when we're just one person with an idea and no money? And it doesn't matter that the idea is extraordinary. The question is how you take that idea, and this is Mount Everest at sunrise on the Chinese side. Hari and Amar, we got some Nepalis who have the other side of the mountain where it's called Sagarmatha. This is the backside, the Chinese side, Tibet side. And the first and key part of this was we began to create partnerships. In this case, we created a partnership with the governor of Tibet. Now, this was a separate story, how we did it. The governor of Tibet later becomes the president of China, Hu Jintao. That's a separate story. But just remember, we didn't know the man ahead of time. Okay? We had no friendship with the governor, but we had the seed. And the seed started to grow, and he was interested. And so there we have a member of the Future Generations team talking with the governor, who later becomes the president of the country. And the idea, here's the seed, is the idea is nature conservation and community development will go together. Okay? We're going to not separate nature conservation. We're going to put nature conservation together with community development. And on community development side, we're going to teach good health, greenhouses, animal husbandry, ecotourism. That means people are going to learn. Oh, let's go back here. Wrong way. People are going to learn, and we're going to teach nature conservation, trees, sustainable forestry, and conservation management. And this is bottom up. So we create a new word for this new idea. Okay, it's a word. It's a word in the local language, Tibetan. Pen in Tibetan means benefiting the whole. In Nepali, they have the word bikas, which means whole development. And then de, which means creating good and happiness, and ba, which is a worker. So we have a worker who's coming from the community, who's benefiting the community. And around that worker, an idea, this is just an idea at this point. Nobody's paid any money, but we've come together and we've talked and we've created this idea that we will have a new type of worker who rises from the community, who will be supported. And it will be done in partnership. Okay, so a nature preserve is being created, the Chomolungma, which is the Tibetan word for Mount Everest, National Nature Preserve, National Park, and it's going to be created as a partnership. And one partner is the government, the top down. The second partner is the bottom up, the Pendaba, the workers from the community working with the top down. And then there's the outside in, which is symbolized by the nature preserve that's bringing in new ideas. Three-way partnership that's going to come together here. And this partnership is going to take over management by the people of this extraordinary land. And in this case, you see Mount Everest, which is off on the right, Lhotse, which is the fourth highest mountain, and Makalu, which is the fifth highest mountain on the left-hand side. Okay, these huge mountains over an area that's the size of Denmark. And in this picture, you have the Pendaba, who's starting to talk with the local community people and share, what can we do? Remember what I was saying about there's going to be community development of health and forestry. The Pendaba is not doing the work. This is not an aid delivery program. The Pendaba is teaching what you can do about your health, what you can do to plant better fields, what you can do to protect the land. So this teaching, this is a learning process that is happening, not an aid delivery process. And it's complicated. They're formal lessons. These are pictures that we're using to teach because these people were illiterate. Okay? They come to class and they're studying. We're going to teach them a little bit of reading and writing in this whole process, but you can teach so much with illustrations and ideas. And then you take the intellectual illustrations and ideas and you move it into practical training. In this case, going out and let us train you how to use a little bit of plastic. And as your village and as your community, you will own this greenhouse. No individual had the money to build a greenhouse out of plastic and bamboo, but together they were able to do that. And then they were able to start some planting in trees in that greenhouse to grow. So in the Everest area, scale 1 happened. Okay, and there were 223 pendabas serving 318 villages. And the idea had grown by learning, action learning and experimentation in this one area that is large, but it was 4 counties of China. The 2 of those 4 counties were the poorest counties in all of China when this program began. Today, all 4 counties are middle class due to the bottom-up energy and growth that has happened from the people. And a wide range of community development services happened. They learned to care for trees, manage basic health needs. They created family hotels with tourists could come because obviously with a place like Mount Everest, many tourists want to come. And there were health refresher courses and learning that continued to happen. Action learning, experimentation, always growing. What you have is the Chomolungma National Nature Preserve is a scale squared center for human development. Okay, and so the people are learning how to improve their lives while they're learning how to take care of nature's life and conservation at the same time. This is being done bottom up by the people, and ultimately it goes to Tibet-wide scale. Tibet, you can see Nepal down here. This is Nepal, right in here. It goes from about over here where the Sikkim border is to Nepal over here. Okay, so we have 3 members of this class that are from Nepal. Tibet is this part of China that's all over here. Okay, and it all began here in the Mount Everest region. Okay, on just north of Nepal. And then it expands to these other areas. It's starting to go to scale by a scale squared center that I just described to you. And that happens with partnerships. Luke mentioned the role of partners. He also mentioned the role of process in this plan. PPP, planning is partnership process. Okay? So we have these partners who are coming together and we're talking about these ideas of how to make the scale 1 process work better. We're not going to just copy scale 1. We're going to engage in action learning. We're going to engage in experimentation. And so we go from the Mount Everest area over to the eastern part of Tibet, to the headwaters of 4 of the world's biggest rivers, the Yangtze, the Mekong, the Salween, and the Brahmaputra. And in these 4 river valleys is 1/7 of all the timber resources of China. Okay, these are the deepest valleys in the world. The Brahmaputra Valley is 4 times deeper than America's Grand Canyon. Okay, so in this area, we start to do group action planning. Scale squared. Scale 1, first of all, stimulating community awareness and learning and energy. Just sitting on the ground, folks. We have to pay some bus tickets to get everybody together. But this, you can see there's no fancy offices happening, but the government has given us permission to come together and start to do stimulating community awareness, learning, and energy. And that grows. We're starting to get classes. This is an area that's huge in size. Okay, it's the size of the country of Italy. And people are coming together now. So we go out into the field for practical training. These are pendabas. These are people just like you and me. They're people from the local community. Their local communities. There's no difference between these people and the people in Burundi, or the people in Bolivia, or the people in any part of the world. Okay? They're going out into their community for field training, and they're measuring things. They're getting data so that they come home with real evidence that they can talk to their leaders. With that evidence, they can go and they can get money. Future Generations wasn't giving them money. Okay? Yeah, we may have been giving them bus tickets so that we can do that. We were doing them training. There was some money involved, but it wasn't very much. They were then implementing these ideas, growing new plants that they had never before in their lives tasted. Okay? Because they were now using things like greenhouses that they'd never used before. They were learning. Okay, the idea was growing. It was growing with real results that in this case they could eat. And over a period of 7 years, it didn't happen right away, but because partnerships, an area that was being deforested, as you see in the upper right-hand photograph, huge valleys, having all the trees cut off of them. Many of you have seen that happen in your own countries, massive deforestation. But in the left-hand, lower left, you see a picture of the protected areas in these valleys. 400 pendabas were trained, 50 village leaders, training 50 people. At the village level, they started to implement policies, training 400 people from the villages who were paid by the villagers. We did not pay for them. These 400 people were being paid by their local villages because the villages were getting health care. The villages were getting economic development. There was a reason why the villagers paid to have these pendabas taken care of. Therefore, it's sustainable. So we go back to the whole role of meeting and partnering with the top down. If you try to fight your government, you're probably going to lose. But so a revolution is very difficult. Evolution is possible. Okay? So how do you sit with the government? How do you sit with your partners and create evolution of ideas? One of the best ways is to get out of the meeting and go outside. Go out in the real world and talk to real people. So in this case, we left the meeting. We took the government officials. We were in the capital city of Lhasa, Tibet, and said, let's go outside and take a look. And Lhasa was a city that was growing very fast. The Chinese were moving in by the thousands into this part of Tibet. They were moving in by the tens of thousands. And what was happening and what happened, this is a picture of Lhasa city. But when we left the meetings where we were planning with the government officials, we said, look at this area here. Let's create this area into a national park. It's a wetlands area. We know we did it in the Mount Everest area. We did it in the Four Great Rivers area. Let's do it here in the middle of the city. Let's get a partnership with the people. It's an idea, folks. It's just an idea. It seems crazy. But we had a partnership at that point. And so the governor of the mayor of town, one of these people happened to be the mayor of town in the meeting. And he said, I have a road building budget and I'm going to build a road all around this wetlands area. And as the mayor of town, I'm going to say you can build on one side of the road, you can't build on the other. Now this satellite picture was taken long after we created this, because, pardon me, we're going to get this number to hold. This satellite picture was taken long after we created the nature preserve, but you can see that the city has grown and the land has been protected now many years later, because we created not a fence that went up and down like a normal fence around a park. We created a fence that was horizontal, a new idea. It was a road, and it was built with the local road building budget. Okay, now let's keep watching this idea grow. It's an idea. So then they walked in and we saw that there were a lot of wild animals pelts being sold. There was killing of animals that shouldn't be. These are endangered species. So we now have a partnership with the government. We have a partnership with the people. We can create new laws that protect on the wildlife. And in your reading for this week, this is described in more detail. So we come back to the meeting. We come back to the partnership. And very importantly, what we are coming back to is process. Okay? We're coming back to process. And something scary happens now. The officials demand expansion. Everybody is so excited. Action learning has been happening, experimentation has been happening, and the officials demand expansion. So the process, unfortunately, in this case, due to the power of the officials and the power of the Communist Party, moves to a blueprint approach. And suddenly the PENDABA program starts to be mandated in replication. Now, I want to ask you a question. What has happened in this picture here from the earlier PENDABA pictures? Did somebody see what has happened in this picture?
You went from
Is
where?
it they're more official? They're at like a table and stuff?
Yeah, that's right, but look who's not at the table. The women
Oh,
are
the
in the
women.
back of the room.
The women.
Guys are sitting up front. Women who were making the PENDABA program happen, one of those earlier pictures I showed you, 100% women, have been moved to the back of the room. Okay? The blueprint approach has locked itself in and the guys have taken over control. I'm sure that's no surprise to any of you. But the process is still moving, folks. They've got a problem. And what is not happening anymore is scale squared. We've gone from scale 1 to scale cubed, and we've dropped scale squared. That's a problem. Action learning and experimentation are no longer happening. So we've had success. This is a huge area. This is the size of Western Europe, the Tibet Autonomous Region of China. And the areas in red are areas where we created large nature preserves that are doing community development and nature protection. So it is not a failure. When I go to bed at night, and as my dear friend Ruben Prentice says, when I go to bed at night and I talk to my pillow, okay, I'm very happy that all these nature preserves have happened and the land is protected. And I know what it was like back in the 1980s when this seed was gotten to be planted. And we've come a long, long way. The process went forward. The seed grew to scale. But there were a lot of problems on the way. And in the process, we forgot how to do scale squared. We just thought we had all the answers. Okay? And I just want to say, folks, I realize this comes from the roof of the world. It's the highest mountain. None of you are ever going to be able to go and do something like this in Tibet, because that's not your country. That's not your place. But your place can have a seed planted. And the wonderful thing is you've already planted the seed. You've taken ACC 601. You've done labs 1 and 2. Okay? Your job, you've started. You can keep going. So we have a few minutes left. I'm open for questions, comments, discussion. Let's use this time so that you can see how you can take your seeds to scale.
So Daniel, just one thing I was reflecting and listening to you just now, and you talked about kind of the importance of being from there. As we're transitioning out of our theoretical focus in this course from scale squared to scale cubed. And you mentioned at the end of your presentation that Pendaba program got to scale cubed. Can you talk a little bit more about that in relationship to the formation of the Pendaba Society, why that's important? It's one of only 2 of its kind in the world, and the individual who is from Tibet who took this idea and really helped that cube vision come into crystallization.
Luke, thank you. I totally should have included some slides on that. You notice how we help each other. Luke helps me when I forget a whole part of my presentation. Then he does so very nicely. Maybe he's respectful to his father, but in any case, Luke, thank you very much. We had a student in this master's degree. This master's degree that you're taking, his name was Norbu. I first met Norbu when he was working in the Mount Everest Nature Preserve. He had graduated from high school. He had never gone to college. He was working as a local official at a check post in the most distant part of the Mount Everest National Park. And he was running a gate saying, you can go through here or not. You can all imagine that. You might have been there as well, running a gate. And every time I came up there, he would come running up to me and he would say, Dr. Taylor, can you talk with me? He had a book. He was trying to teach himself English. That's all he was trying to do. And there was this American who came, he would practice his English and he would say, please stop and have some tea with me so he could keep practicing his English. And after 2 years, I said, you're a really smart boy. Can I get you a good job? He says, yes, please get me a good job. So we move him to the headquarters of the national park, and I can do that. I have some influence. And every time I come to the headquarters of the national park, he comes running up and says, will you please do this? Please, I want to practice. I want to do this. I've been reading this book. Please do this. After a while, I say to him, Norbu, I want to put you in this master's degree that our university teaches. And he said, no problem. I said, I'm the president. I can get you admitted. Okay? But he's never gone to college. So I have to bend the rules to get him admitted into our master's degree. And then in his master's degree, he does what Luke was saying. He decides to create an NGO in Tibet under the Communist Party, which, by the way, creating an NGO in Tibet under the Communist Party is against the law. And so he starts in his courses in this, scale squared course. He's taking the same course you're taking. And he starts to read to Chinese law. And he figures out that he can create an NGO if he creates it as a religious organization, using that thing, but makes it non-religious. And so he creates the Pendaba Society. And then as the Pendaba Society, he starts to grow this process of the Pendabas that I've just described to you. And he's very successful. Number one, he stayed out of jail. That's a pretty big achievement. Number two, he starts to win prizes all over China because he's doing the impossible. But he's making partnerships in that process. In the process, he's making so many partnerships with the government. He's going to scale. He's doing this blueprint approach. But in fact, he's lost the whole idea of scale squared. Now, folks, I am not criticizing Norbu. Norbu is one of the heroes of your master's degree program. He's one simple guy who was sitting in the dirt, running a check post, who had never gone to college. And he took this project and this idea and he won the United Nations Equator Prize, which is the most prestigious prize in sustainable development. You can do it too. Norbu has done it. And he did it just with this master's degree. And I could say a lot more, but Luke, thank you for asking that question.
Well, and a follow-up to it, Daniel, can you talk a little bit about the process of scale cubed in that context? And while it's true that you've lost the current function of action learning, that process of that cubed function did come from the earlier incubation. So let's jump in. I know that there are probably some questions about the stories, but knowing that coming up now, we're getting into scale cubed, which tends to be the hardest part of social change for most people to wrap their head around. So I want to start to dig into that.
The key thing is that Norbu was using the laws of China. He was not fighting the laws of China. Many of you have heard about the Tibet independence movement, the Dalai Lama wanting to get freedom for Tibet. No, Norbu says, I'm going to use the laws of my country. Okay? And that's how he scales up. He scales up using the laws and the financing of the government of China. And the financing did not support scale squared. It supported only the scale cubed part. Okay, the top down. Now, maybe it's my mistake that I stopped being able to figure out ways of getting financial support to them and technical support to keep scale squared going. Okay, because I will probably have some responsibility in this too. Okay, but the point that is relevant here is that in scale cubed, if you take apart the meaning of scale cubed, okay, what you have to do is to figure out how to grow for extension through adaptive learning, collaboration, okay? Collaboration now is a type of partnership. Adaptive learning is changing your scale squared so that it fits within the top-down and framework. In order to have extension, the E part of it. Okay, and the S part of it is so important. The beginning of scale squared, which is systems. Okay, we're back now into complexity theory. Okay, where what we're doing is we're creating emergence. Scale cubed is creating the emergent process, systems, okay, not a structure. That would be the wrong S. Systems for collaboration, adaptive learning, and extension. Okay, emergence, folks, emergence. It's not cause and effect. It's not a straight line. It's working in the complexity that we all live in, and it's learning how to see the causes and see the opportunities and rise on them. Luke, do you want to follow up?
No, that's fine. Are there any questions about Daniel's presentation and the Pendibus Society or the Tibet work or scale cubed as we begin to get get ready to look at that, because we will be spending most of the rest of the course focusing on your final lab and then scale cubed. So this is really just the beginning. If it's all still a little foreign, make sure you've understood exactly why scale squared is important, and we'll begin digging into scale cubed, especially in the remaining classes.
I have a question, and then I also want to draw everyone's attention to Grace's question in the chat. But so, talking about how the scale squared phase was sort of skipped for scale cubed, I mean, is it too late? Do these have to work in time progression? 1, 2, 3?
No, that's a great question. And scale squared was happening at first, okay, when the Pendiva program grew. And then as it started to really go big and the government said, this is wonderful, it moved to the very structured scale cubed. And Norbu could easily now, if he had some financial support, set up scale squared. Scale squared costs some money. You have to do the action learning and the experimentation. And so Norbu ran out of money. That's one reason it happened. The good news is, folks, just spoiler alert, Luke sent some money to Norbu just 2 weeks ago so that he could do some scale squares. Luke found some money in his budget.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that, Rosie, you bring up a great point, which is that we often see, that's a common thing if you're working at scale, and some of you may find yourself in situations where you have jobs where you're working in a place of public policy. And in those instances, when you're trying to create quality impact, finding a program that is already being offered at large scale, something like in the case of the Pendiva program, it had scale squared function. It had action learning and experimentation feeding into it. For many years, that was lost. But a very quick way to breathe new life into a program is to turn that scale squared functionality on. Get innovation happening again. Get experimentation happening again. And suddenly the structure is there. The committees are there. They just need some new membership. They need new energy. This goes back to our original, idea of mobilizing human energy. And what was Grace's question?
Yeah, so first I want to say, so Albert asked this question just to me by accident, but it's good for the whole group. So he says, it seems like we need to think about formal training to make sure the 5 criteria are monitored. Would you agree?
Yeah, I want to pick up on that.
Okay.
Formal training is essential, okay? What drives seed scale is learning. You see the L part of that always coming up with its learning. And it costs money. Now, typically it costs 20% what a normal development program costs, but you have to spend some money doing the learning process. And that needs good teaching. And one of the best ways I've found to learn, and I mentioned it in the slides, is taking people to see something. Don't take them to class and give them a PowerPoint. Okay, that's what I'm doing right now. I would much rather put you all into my airplane and fly you to China. You would really learn something if we would all go to China together. But what I did do with the Chinese people was I brought them to America often. And senior government officials wanted to take a trip from China to America. And so then we could do action learning at places like Yellowstone National Park. And they could see that Yellowstone National Park had a lot of problems and that they could do it better in China. So we used that. Now to get back to Grace's question. Grace.
So, yeah, you got the question.
Right, Grace and everybody else. What you need to do right now is just read the lesson. The lesson is, I think, very clear here on second lesson in lab 3. for step by step. And I'm not trying to duck your question. I'm trying to give it to you in writing. And Rosie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Grace will get her answer if she just follows the lesson assignment.
Yeah, let me jump in on a couple points. So first of all, on the point of the 5 criteria, this is, I just want to go back to a few concepts from 601 when Dan was talking about those exposure trips, and we talk about the importance of studying successes elsewhere, trying to figure out what we can adopt and what we can adapt. When we were looking at scale squared, we talked specifically about one of the most important reasons to understand scale squared is that many of you might not have the opportunity to be practicing scale squared at this juncture in your community. You might not have the resources or whatever, but learning why it's important so you can identify scale squared centers that you can learn from. So Grace, to your question, no, you don't need to be worried about enacting scale squared or scale cubed. Those take time. So what we want to do, but all of these, you may be at some of those junctures before you know it. So it's really important to understand the context through which growth happens. That's and what the ultimate, where it can go, that's scale cubed. It's important to learn the function of scale squared, both because at some point before you know it, you will need to probably be enacting that to keep growth sustained, but also to participate in it so that you can go and study the successes of others. That's why we do that task at scale 1. And at this point, it's about getting those relationships nurtured. It's about beginning the process. And when you're scaling up, you want to plan so that everybody is moving forward with somewhat the same collective vision of where you're headed. It's like a compass bearing. You don't all need to be going to the exact same spot, but you all want to generally be headed north.
We're out of time, but I want to make one final point. Following exactly on what Luke is saying. In this compass bearing, in following this general direction, you're going to get really frustrated. And it's so important that you keep your relationships growing stronger. Okay? Because it is in stronger relationships that you get the strength to go forward. And the hardest thing for me has been to control my anger, to control my frustration, and to let the relationships lead, and to learn to listen to the truth that somebody else might be saying when they tell me, I just can't do what you want me to do. And I'm saying, let's find a way together because maybe my way is the wrong way. And that's hard. There's a level of humility here and a requirement of listening that if you're going to make this type of community engagement and relationship growth happening, really requires making your individual personality disappear in order to become part of the group process.
Thank you, everyone. Maher, if you want to stay on or others want to stay on, Maher's asked a great question in the chat, but we are at time. So for other folks who have to go, feel free to log off. Thank you so much for coming. We'll see you next week. But I also want to take a crack at responding to what Maher's asked because it's a really good question. And he's asked in the chat, despite the involvement of top-down and the support from partners, how can we ensure the motivation of people playing a vital role in the work and continue leading the learning as they're facing many challenges such as bureaucracy and COVID? Well, Maher, I'm going to give you a kind of broader response, but people are going to stay engaged if the process is improving their lives. If the process is making them excited, is making them empowered, is helping them make money, they're seeing quality of life. Think back to our revolution of rising aspirations. And that feedback loop is the same whether it's for a person or group of people. But this is why scale squared is so important as a function. Because through that action, learning, and experimentation, you're keeping the quality up. And by keeping the quality up, the quality of the improvements up, people are going to stay engaged. They feel like the participation is active. They feel like their suggestions are being heard. This is where scale squared is important, is that it gives a continuous feedback loop of quality through participation. And often, as Daniel says, what can be lost when you scale only in policy is a space, is a door, is an avenue where that qualitative improvement, that experimentation, those risks can happen. And someone says, this approach is great, but instead of doing it for healthcare, I want to do it for agriculture. And lo and behold, it works. And from that, you then get a lot of other people then go learn from that community's attempt at experimenting. And the reason why that's so critical is when we talk about you've heard me say many times, the evidence is the glue that holds us together. Well, it's the evidence of people's lives improving. And people will stay engaged and participate and give their energy. They will give in relation to how much they get back, in relation to the quality of life improvements for them.
Good job. And Maher, thank you for the question. Thank you, Herman. Good to see everybody. And we will see you all next week, but do get back to us with questions.